afternoon. My name is Bob Mueller, and today we're going to talk about French and German Christmas customs. I'm going to mix in some traditional French, some traditional German, and then some local French and German customs. So it'll be kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different things. But in France, Christmas is called Noël, and the season really goes from December 6th to Epiphany, January 6th. So they have a long holiday season. They get started early. The French always love to party, so why not? Let's have a long one. So it kind of starts out with the feast of Saint Nicholas, and we'll explain who Saint Nicholas was a little bit later. But in France, Santa is called Père Noël, Father Christmas. And he's normally seen, when he comes to visit, he has a donkey. Anybody know the donkey's name? Bob, you know. I told you I'm going to. You're awake now, so I'm going to call him. No, his name is Guy, which means mistletoe in French. That's where we get the Guy and E. And as always, when I was growing up, there would Santa would have little characters that would kind of make sure you were good. You know, if you were going to get presents from Santa, you had to be good. Well, Père Noël has one, and his name is Père Fouettard. And he is, and with most of these characters, they always have sticks or coal, that sort of thing. And so I think that means Father Farmer or something like that. So he gets a part of the Christmas season in France. So I'm going to kind of go through the holiday season, and this one's local. This is called the Procession of the White Lily. And this happened over in Kaskaskia. When St. Genevieve was founded in the late 1740s, we were actually part of Immaculate Conception Parish in Kaskaskia. And that parish started very early. It started out as a mission church of the Jesuits, of the Illinois Indians. And one year in the winter, they were going to have a service to honor Mary, the mother of Jesus. Well, people would bring stuff to church at that time. And so this one Illinois Indian lady, Native American, didn't have any money. She was kind of like the poor person in town, and she's walking to church going, what am I going to do? Snow on the ground, and lo and behold, a white lily grows, and she picked it and brought it to church. So over in Kaskaskia, which is now on this side of the river, by the way, in Illinois, they still do the Procession of the White Lily. It's done only by ladies, and they sing the song in the Illinois native language. It's a really moving ceremony. Yes?
When do they do that?
Probably next weekend, I think. You might check. I had a date, but it was the wrong one. It was 2 years ago. I forgot to update that one. But you might check around. It's Immaculate Conception Parish, Kaskaskia. So one of the things the French did was they had a crèche, a manger scene, and we normally have Jesus and Mary and baby Jesus and the three wise men, maybe an angel and a couple of shepherds. Over in France, they have all these little things called samples. And they're figures that are the traditional Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, but then they do the townskeeper, or the townspeople, people that have, you can see a mayor here. Over here, this is an Alsatian lady. You can tell by her headdress. And you have a house cleaning lady. So they would put these around the crèche. And over in Felix Valley, they have a set of santons on their display. That really came from Provence in southern France. So there's always kinds of legends about holidays. And the French were not, they did have those legends. And most of our legends came from Canada. The people that settled St. Genevieve were French Canadians that had come from Quebec and Montreal and Three Rivers, and they'd come down and they settled on the east side of the river in Kaskaskia and Cahokia and Fort Deschartres. And so they brought their customs with them. And some of them are kind of, the earth opening up to reveal its treasures on Christmas Eve. Animals have the gift of speech at midnight, but never listen to them, or you'll be struck dumb for the next year. The dead rise from the graves and gather at the cemetery cross for Mass. And my favorite is the thing called the Le Chasse Galerie, the flying canoe. So a lot of the Canadians were out in the woods cutting wood or chopping firs, and they wanted to go home for what was called the temps de fête, the time of the celebration, because that's when a lot of the parties were happening in Quebec and Montreal. So they made a pact with the devil that they could get in their canoe and they could fly back to Quebec for the holidays, which they did. And they drank and partied and danced for 7 days. And then one of the conditions was that the canoe wouldn't fly if they invoked the name of God. So on the way back, one of the guys, he was kind of passed out. And he finally woke up and he looked down and they were like 1,000 feet over the steeple. And he says, my God, and they crashed. So that's the story of the Le Chasse Galerie. And that legend came down from Canada to here over in old mines. You hear the story of Le Chasse Galerie. One of the things the French do is on the Feast of St. Nicholas, which is on December 6th, they would put out their wooden shoes because that's what the people wore here when it was rainy or snowy. Most of the time they wore moccasins. But so they would put out, and they would leave carrots for Guy, the donkey up here in the well. One of the important things when the French Canadians came down here, they were Catholic, being from France originally. When we became Spanish after the French and Indian War, we were still Catholic. And then when France came back in 1800 and Napoleon got it back from Spain, we were still Catholic. So midnight mass was a big deal to the French, called Minuit Masse. And there was a thing in 1805, there weren't that many priests around, and priests from St. Genevieve would actually go up to St. Louis, and they'd go all the way over to Mine-Lamont and stuff like that to do things. So you always didn't have a priest there to say midnight mass. In 1805, the priest that visited said it was so cold that the church got filled up with people because they had not been able to come to midnight mass. Henry Marie Breckinridge, anybody ever hear of him? He's one of our wonderful journalists. When he was 7 years old, his father sent him down the Ohio River and up the Mississippi to come to St. Genevieve to learn French. And he lived in the Vital St. Jean Beauvais house, which is still here. And he lived here 3 years, and then he went later in life, he wrote a book called Recollections of Persons and Places in the West. And in it, he describes coming to St. Genevieve, living with the Beauvais, and he describes going to midnight mass at the church. And when he would have been here, we would have had, not that magnificent edifice that we have up there now, we would have had a vertical log church. That's actually our fifth church. We had 3 vertical logs in the old town, and the last one they moved up here in 1794. Then we had a big stone church, and then after that, in the 1870s, they built the current brick church. But he talked about walking up the street. I mean, he just lived 2 blocks from here, walking up the street by himself, and he was there an hour before midnight mass. And then he said that the village had brought the biggest candles they could find to light the church. But he just sat there with recollection for a whole hour before midnight mass started. We still do midnight mass here, only we do it at 10:30, so I guess it's not midnight mass. It was always tough as a little kid to be able to stay awake. And they always start midnight mass with a flourish of trumpets. If that will raise you out of the pew, nothing else will. So the French, being Catholic, they went to midnight mass. They also went to 2 other masses during the day. We call them low masses and high masses. High masses are the ones that have all the singers. And one of the customs was for the French for a little child to carry baby Jesus up to the crèche scene. Some of these traditions transcend the French and the German, and because they're right next to each other. But one of the other things they would do would be to mold 3 candles together with the Trinity, God the Father, the Holy Ghost, and the Christ child. The other thing that was a tradition here was something called the pain béni, which is called the blessed bread. And it was tradition at Christmas that one lady in the village would get to bake this special loaf of bread. And so they would take it, the lady would take it to church, the priest would bless it, and they would give some to each of the person there, and then they would give some to take home to the mother or the grandmother who wasn't able to come to church. And little Henry Breckenridge, who was a Presbyterian or a Methodist, I'm not sure which, got to be an altar boy, and he said, I liked it because I got more of the pain béni. Well, one year, we had this one priest here, Father Hilaire, who was a troublemaker. I mean, he just, there was a lot of things. There's more documents in Spanish about Father Hilaire than anything else. Well, there was a lady that came with her loaf of bread, and he said, I'm not going to bless it. I don't like you. And I mean, it went all the way to the bishop. I mean, there was all, and the lieutenant governor in St. Louis, it was a big deal. One day he just disappeared. We don't know what happened to him. So Christmas music to the French was always a big deal, like on Chant de Noël. I'm going to play some of this. This is the first Christmas carol in America. It was written in the 1680s by Father Jean Leboeuf, and he was a Jesuit that worked with the Durans. And it's called "'Twas the Moon in Wintertime." She's singing it in the Wyandot language, and then in this, she also goes in and sings it in French and sings it in English. I think it's a beautiful song. I just discovered it about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's become one of my favorites. You can notice the Native American, you almost got a drum beat in the back there that keeps it going. Very pretty. This is another one. This is kind of a slow one. From Belle Jeanette, Isabella. Well, I'm 100% German. I kind of fall in love with the French singing. I mean, it's kind of pretty. It's not kind of, it is. So, Bring a Torch, Jeanette, and Isabella's another one. You'll probably recognize this tune. It has a little bit of a long intro. Angels we have heard of. So, it's something that we always sang in English, obviously. This is another one that, oops. See if this is going to work. The Il est né le divin enfant, he is born the divine child. I always like these long intros. I should probably trim those. We still sing this at midnight mass, this song, in
French?
In French. And sometimes we have a young man that sings Minuit Chrétien, which is a holy night in French. It's just awesome. It's beautiful. So, in what we call Upper Louisiana here, we had a different style of music. We call it Upper Louisiana fiddle music. Many of you have heard of Dennis Stromat. Well, this is Dennis Stromat playing Il est né. We'll play. Does it sound like the same kind of song?
More fun.
They still do the same intro. I just wanted, it takes a really religious song, very slow, melodic, and then he makes it almost into a dance song. So here's another French song, Where Are You Coming From, Shepherd? This is La Petite Chanteur des Camps, which is a French kids choir. And you can just imagine them being in a big cathedral singing this song. This is Dennis Stroman playing the same song. So it's got a different beat. This is not Cajun music. It's not Quebecois music. It's kind of, this is what they play at Old Mines. I mean,
Is this French?
yep, but it's called Paw French. We have a dialect that is different than Quebecois or Cajun. It's kind of a localized dialect. It kind of came from Brittany to Canada to here. And Old Mines spoke it as the language into the 1920s. And there's a couple of people that are teaching it. Dennis has a class, and there's another one. So one of the things I mentioned, the French would go to midnight mass, and after midnight mass, they would go home, and Mom and Grandma had made this big feast called Le Pal de Réveillon. Du Réveillon is the awakening. And so they would eat and drink for a long time. I guess some of them probably till they had to go to low mass at 6 o'clock in the morning. But some of the things that they would eat here, a tortillere, which is a pork pie. It's a crust on the bottom and the top, very tasty. Here in France, they would have had duck. Here they had turkey and dinde. And also down here, boudin, and this would be a black sausage or a pork sausage, and then which they would make locally because they had more pigs than cows, because they didn't really eat a lot of beef. They used oxen to plow with, so the beef was not as prevalent. And then down here would be bread and cheese. We don't see a lot of dairy products in the inventories and stuff that they would do, but they would add it. One of the traditions is something called bouillon. And a bouillon is a strange thing. It's usually you would take an old chicken and you boil it with vegetables. Got to have turnip, got to have cabbage, carrots. And then when it's done, you take the broth and you serve that first. And then afterwards you eat the chicken and the vegetables. Well, a bouillon can also be a party. So when you hear about a bouillon, it might be the dish, or it might be you're going to have a party. Now, one of the traditions in the French was that the best bouillon was made with your neighbor's chicken. And I find things in the newspaper here in the 1910s, 1920s saying, it's bouillon time, watch your chickens. And that was not just here. I see that also in Cahokia. So this was kind of a French thing. So this time of the year is bouillon time. I usually make it for this event. Some of the other things, they would have a lot of desserts at the awakenings, and they had all this food and soup and stuff. Up here in the upper left, upon the piece, is the French gingerbread. It doesn't look like the German or gingerbread that we're used to, but it tastes pretty good. Apple pie, because we grew a lot of apples here. Here is a tart with black walnuts. They didn't have the English walnuts here, they had the black ones. They didn't think they were very tasty, but they would make them into pies. A croquenole, just about every culture has some kind of fried donut, and this is the one that the French have, and it's like a strip with a slit in it. You kind of turn it inside out, fry it, and then put powdered sugar on it. This is one that I grew up with called mincemeat pie.
Yeah.
Most people don't make that anymore. We always had it at Thanksgiving. Sugared pecans, syrup cake, and just dried fruit. The kind of things that they would have on hand that they keep. Remember, they don't have freezers, they don't have refrigerators, so they have to eat things from around the area. One of the traditions of the awakening, or La Réveillon, was to leave a candle burning in the window in case Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus, or soon-to-be baby Jesus, came by and needed a place to stay. I mentioned that the time period was from like January or December 6th all the way to January 6th. It's called Le Temps de Fête. And please excuse my French. I really am not a francophile, so one of my friends said you kind of butcher your French. Oh well. But one guy, I guess he was after like about 1810 was coming into town. He said the whole town was just partying for a whole week here, and it kind of got that tradition again from Canada when they came down.
Was that going on in France too?
I don't know.
Or did that develop in?
Yeah, it may have been. I mean, we had primarily French Canadians, you know, they would have been like second, third, fourth generation, but then we did have a few Frenchmen here. I mean, I think in the 1779 militia census, we had like 10 French, really true French guys. They were always in the minority. So one of the things that's very, the French did, by the way, they call New Year's Eve Saint Sylvester night. And so do the Germans. But one of the things is called the singing of the La Guillenée. And this tradition goes back to France, really back to the Druids. And so they would, Guy, again, is mistletoe. So it's kind of, the Druids used to really respect, mistletoe was sacred. And Guillenée, which it's sometimes said means mistletoe of the year. So what they would do here is they would dress in costume and they would start going from house to house singing this song. They'd rap on the door. There'd be a troop of people and they'd be dressed in these outlandish costumes and they start singing the La Guillenée. And it kind of goes, it begs entry into the house, apologizes for waking everybody up, and then they ask for a piece of beef 90 feet long. But if they don't get that, they ask for the eldest daughter to dance the night away. So we still do that same tradition here on New Year's Eve, the singing of the La Guillenée. It's mostly German heritage guys now that probably don't understand the French any better than I do, but they can sing that La Guillenée. And in the old days, they would go from house to house. Then they started going to like the nursing homes and the schools and then the bars. And it was called running the Guillenée. Courrier de Guillenée. And now they use a bus. So I started down in New Orleans, not New Orleans, a little bit further north in Louisiana. They had something called Courrier de Mardi Gras, running the Mardi Gras. And they had these characters dress up in costumes, riding horses, and they go from house to house, and somebody throws a live chicken out, and these guys get off the horse, and they've been imbibing a little bit, and they sing this song. And it's not exactly like our Guillenée, but it has a lot of the same roots. It's kind of amazing how that French culture went up and down the Mississippi Valley. We have a troupe, and traditionally it was made up of men. But in the past, they now have women in our Guillenée troupe. But in the past, we've had women Guillenée groups. We've had African American Guillenée groups. We had kids Guillenée groups. In fact, we even had a German Guillenée troupe out in Zell, which is one of our little German communities around here. So I have the words in La Guillenée in German too. So this is Dennis Stromat playing the La Guillenée. So you have a caller. If you look down here, this is Mike Papin. His father was the caller before, and the Papins have been involved in La Guillenée for years. And they had this one or two fiddlers and the caller, and then the rest of the people kind of tromp around, and it's kind of throw out a verse, and then there's a refrain. So we call it various things over the years. La Guillenée is what I usually use, but then they have Guillaume, 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 spelled different ways. And back in the 1880s, we had two newspapers here, and the editors hated each other. So they would get in these battles in the newspaper, but they argued for about 3 weeks about the words to La Guillenée. I've always wanted to do a two-person play of these two guys, but unfortunately we don't have enough newspapers for that time period. One of the things that after Christmas, New Year's Day was another special day, Le Jour de l'An, which is New Year's Day, and one of them was called La Benediction Paternelle, the paternal blessing, and all of the little kids went to the oldest person in their family, and the grandfather would say, "Sally, have you been a good girl this year?" And she'd go, "Yes, I have been a very good girl." And the little boy, who had been probably in trouble most of his thing, he'd say, "Yes, I've been a good boy." And they would get gifts from and a blessing from the grandfather. Another custom was called the exchange of kisses. We had we know more about St. Genevieve from travel writers that came here and wrote things down than we have no diaries and things like that. Well, Christian Schultz happened to be here on New Year's Day, and he said they had this strange custom. The slave would kiss their mistress, and the master would kiss his wench. And my wife has refused to let me kiss any wenches, and we don't have wenches anymore. So that's a New Year's custom. Again, it's kind of the start of the new year. You're going to get rid of all the anger and fighting that you've done throughout the year and have a blessing to go forward. New Year's greeting, bonne année et l'après-midi à la fin de vos jours. Happy New Year, may paradise be yours at the end of your days. And that was a tip. You might have heard that on the streets of St. Genevieve back then. And that was another day where you got presents. The jour de l'entrain is the kids would go to their godparents, which were very important people in the French culture, and they would get little gifts during that day from their godparents. One of the other things the French loved to do was to dance. And all the writers talk about, they would dance till dawn. And so one of the things they would do is it's called the Bal de Roi. It's typically done on Epiphany, January 6th. And here, everybody got to go to the dance. There wasn't classes about the rich. Well, the rich might have been dressed a little nicer, but everybody got to go. And they would select a king or queen with beans and a cake, the king's cake. And we still do that, King's Ball. We don't, like Midnight Mass, we don't do it at midnight. We don't do King's Ball on Epiphany. We do it on the first weekend of February. And we select a king by finding a little baby Jesus, plastic baby Jesus in the cake. And then there's other beans in the cake, and those could be other members of the court. We even have a junior king. Every 4 years we have a Queen's Ball. So next year will be a Queen's Ball. So it's a lot of fun. A lot of people come dressed in costume. Colonial clothing. And you can bring food in. It's up at the VFW Hall. And we do all kinds of dances. They have callers. And it's kind of funny watching them because when people get out there at first, they're kind of stumbling around. But these dances are really long. And by the end, they look really good. So this might be the type of music you would hear at the Le Bal de Roi. It's funny, we've had people meet there that eventually got married. One year they couldn't find the baby Jesus. It happens to be a Queen's Ball, and so they took the first lady that got a bean, and she had to pick. She wasn't from here, and she picked somebody. She had to pick somebody. So she picked this guy, and they ended up getting married. And we had a couple that got engaged here, and then were king and queen and came back. We've had a false king. One guy got the baby Jesus, said, "I'm not going to be it. Not me," and he gave it to his buddy. And then his buddy says, "I'm not giving it back. I'm king for life." So we had to start writing the year on and make little marks. So he's the false king. So that's our French customs. Let's kind of switch to German. The German word for Christmas is Weihnachten. German's W is a V, so that's how they say it. Their season starts a little bit earlier, the first Sunday of Advent, which is a 40-day period before Christmas, kind of like Lent. Mm-hmm. And ours is going to start, I think, probably next week. And it goes to Epiphany, Heilige Drei Könige, which is the Holy Three Kings that show up, the wise men. Some things that are German, Advent wreaths, they're probably not as prevalent as they are now. It was a thing that starts at the beginning of Advent. You have 3 purple candles, a pink candle, and then on Christmas you put a white candle in there. So each Sunday they would light this, and there's a little ceremony with it. And the pink candle is for a kind of a break in Lent. You're supposed to fast and abstain during Lent, so that's called Gaudete Sunday, and that's what the pink one's for. And you can see that they would use various things, cedar and pine and laurel and seeds to mean different things in the Advent wreath. So that goes way back to 1600. We had it as a kid. We still have it in church here during the year. Another one is a little more modern German thing called the Advent calendar, where you have 24 little things, and each day you get to open up a little door and find a little gift or a little something in there. My wife got those from her grandmother, who I guess was Methodist, right? And the Methodist ladies made really neat Advent calendars. Sometimes they make them look like a house, and you go behind each window. This is the Rathaus from Gegenbach, and Rathaus is a city hall. It's kind of a strange name, Rathaus. It's a lot of times they have really good restaurants in those too. But a lot of the Germans that came here were from the Black Forest, so that would be familiar to them. One of the other customs was called the Barbarous Branch. Now, St. Barbara is, I think, December the 5th. And one of the traditions was to put a cherry, a branch of a cherry tree in water and let it sit. And if it bloomed before Christmas, it was good luck. But if it bloomed right on Christmas Day, it was really good luck. So they would use different, you could use lilac and different things. But St. Barbara is also the patron saint of artillery people.
So what year do you have a sufficient contingent of Germans here to recognize Germans?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. I should have probably talked about that. We had a few Germans here in like the 1770s. We had a German doctor, Dr. Bernard Gipken, who studied at Heidelberg University. We had a guy named Franz Kuhlmann. He was from Bavaria. He was a brewer. Now, the French love their wine, but golly darn, they had beer too. And the French didn't like Franz Kuhlmann, so they called him Francois Coman. So all the Colemans around here come from a German guy. But then we had a few right around 1800. The Bircher brothers that were stonemasons. They built like Pierre Menard's stone foundation. About 1820, we had the Zieglers come in, but then in 1832, we started having the major German migration.
1832.
There was about 10 or 12 families that came here. My first ancestor came in 1832. They were predominantly from the Black Forest, which is on the southwest part of Germany, along the Rhine River, which looks pretty much like around here. You have this big river, an alluvial plain, and then you have these kind of, they're mountains, the Black Forest, the Schwarzwald is much higher, but they look pretty much like home. And they're primarily from a lot of little villages from just south of Offenburg, Germany, up to Karlsruhe, which is just a little northeast of like Strasbourg, France. So a lot of times we'll see Alsatians here because sometimes they were German, sometimes they were French. They happen to be French now. And that migration lasted until about 1880. My last ancestor came in 1878. And there was a lot of them that came around 1850 because there was an uprising, a revolution in southern Germany. Back then, they were all little city-states, and the Prussians came in, lined a few of them up, and shot them, and so we had a lot of people come during that time period. I see my friend Bob Klein in the back. His great-grandfather was Ignatius Klein, and he was a soap boiler, and he came in 1848. He's also my cousin, so...
Like the French tolerated the natives well enough that they could tolerate the French too, I guess.
Well, you know what it was? The French owned all the good land in what was known as the Big Field. So the Germans primarily went west of here just a little bit. We had towns of Zell, Weingarten, and New Offenburg. And that's named after three little areas within 7 kilometers of each other near Offenburg, Germany. So they only knew how to farm in the hills. The French farmed down in the alluvial plain. So in Santa is called Nicholas, in St. Nicholas, which we sometimes refer to Santa as that, in Germany, and his feast is on December 6th. And this is all started by a bishop that was in St. Nicholas of Myra, which was like 300 or 400 AD. And he was famous because he gave stuff to the poor. There was this woman that had 3 girls, and they didn't have a dowry, and they had put their stockings on the mantle to dry, and he put coins in there. And I'm going to talk about how that legend causes things that we do now. But St. Nicholas, this guy has more little characters. Remember Père Fouettard, that little guy with the sticks? Well, he has Neck Rupert, who also has sticks and a broom. So you got to be good. But around Germany, you have Pelsbach. One of the guys that I didn't, kind of scary to me, is Krampus. Pelsnickel, and you can see he's got sticks. Hans Trapp, he's another Austrian guy. He's kind of scary. But my best favorite one is not German. He's from Holland, and his name is called Zwarte Pia, which means Black Peter. And if you're not a good child in Holland, Zwarte Piet will come and take you to Spain. So I thought, wow, that sounds like a good deal. Well, actually, Spain had ruled Holland for a while, and the Holland guys and gals didn't like it, so that was the threat. So they had the Germans also had these legends on New Year's Eve. The rivers turn to wine, tree blossoms bear fruit, church bells ring from the bottom of the sea. And one of the strange ones was girls would drop molten lead into a glass of water, and it would foretell if they were going to get married that year. So I guess it was get the lead out or something. Get married. So the Black Forest, they're called Badisch, and that was another dialect that, like, my mother spoke Badisch but didn't teach me. We have about 4 or 5 people that still speak Badisch in town or in the area. We made a movie about it in 2014 called New Offenburg, so it's a neat one to see. But so in the Black Forest, those 12 days that are there are important. Ghosts are active between Christmas and Epiphany. The weather each day through that time tells how each month of the year was going to be. Is it going to be rainy? Is it going to be cold? Is it going to be wet? Is it going to be dry? And if you wash your clothes during that time, you will wash someone out of your life that year. My wife would have a disaster. She loves to do laundry, and if she couldn't do it for a week, there would be a lot of people leaving town. So remember we talked about the crutch scene that the French had? Well, in Germany, it's called the Weihnachtskrippe. The one on the left happens to be the one from my childhood. My brother still has it, and the same figures from our childhood. And it was, Christmas Eve was magical at our house. I mean, you would have just the Christmas tree lights and you'd be singing Christmas songs. But on the right is the manger scene in our church. And if you haven't been up to our church, go in it. It's a beautiful church. And on the right is a statue called the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The Christmas manger covers that whole thing. The statues are about that high.
You're just up here.
Right up there. It's not up yet, but it's a great thing to come see. I grew up in Farmington, but my mother was from here, so she'd bring us over here to see the manger scene here. One of the other ones is called the Weihnachtskrippe Lamm. This is a little bit more Pennsylvania Dutch. You know how sometimes we put up little villages together and little scenes and that sort of thing? Well, the Pennsylvania Dutch really like to do it. And they would, and some of the Germans would do it too, but they always had this thing called a Putzlamm. And my dad would tell the story about when he was a child, his mom, my little 4'10" German grandmother, would make this lamb out of red clay and cotton and use matchsticks for legs. And the tradition, Grandma would start them out on the first day of Advent and say, you're going from Nazareth to Bethlehem, which was the route that Jesus and Mary took. Every day that you were good, you got to go a step further to Bethlehem. My dad and my uncle never got out of Nazareth. So my brother still has a couple of Putzlams from our family. So Santa Claus that name comes from various things. St. Nicholas of Myre, we talk about St. Nick. Kris Kringle in Germany, it's called Christkind. And so that's where Kris Kringle comes from. And Santa Claus, really that comes from the Dutch. So that's how we kind of get all these names. I guess it was Thomas Nast, who was a famous cartoonist back around the time of the Civil War. He really started showing pictures of Santa Claus and how we envision Santa Claus. So we also have Christmas trees. This is really primarily German, a Weihnachtsbaum or a Tannenbaum. Earlier they were called paradise trees, and they were actually hung upside down. Y'all remember a few years ago when Target started selling upside down Christmas trees, and everybody was up in arms about it? It really goes back to the paradise tree, and it's really the Trinity again. The first written record of a Christmas tree is in Strasbourg in 1605, and they would just use fruit, little nuts, and painted hosts to decorate it. So, one of the things that happened, Christmas trees got very popular in Germany. So everybody was going out in the woods and they're cutting the tops out of trees, or pine trees and stuff, to make their Christmas tree, and it killed the tree. So they passed this ordinance that says you can't cut down Christmas trees. So the Germans, being inventive, said, I'm going to make my own Christmas tree. So they would make it, they would have a stem, wooden stem, and you could have wire or dowels, and they would wrap painted colored goose feathers around it to make it look like a fir tree.
My grandmother had one.
The Linden House used to have a display of like 3 or 4 of them every year. So you're right; those are really precious, and it was something the Germans could bring with them when they came on the ships over here. One of the other things, if you didn't have that, you had a tinsel tree where you could take tinsel and or garland and wrap around that. You could make them out of boxwood. We have a little plan for doing that. So that's another German thing, and this thing about goose feathers is always kind of special. Most of what we think of as German or as Christmas decorations came from Germany. Lights on a Christmas tree came from supposedly from Martin Luther. He was walking home from church one night. It was a snowy night. He was walking through the forest and he looked up and he saw the stars. So that's when they started putting candles, real candles, on trees, which was a fire hazard, and so it eventually was what we have now. Ornaments are very German. And there's a special area of Germany where they make all those ornaments, or a lot of them. Tinsel was, I guess it was kind of supposed to look like icicles. They started out making those out of lead. It didn't really work very well. It was hard on the tree. Then they went to pewter, and some of them made silver, which would be pretty expensive, but you can make it really thin. Hardly anybody uses tinsel anymore. We did it as a kid. It finally became made out of plastic, but that was again a German thing. Garland, kind of this, and the candy cane. That really started around Strasbourg again. A music master of the boys' choir, he would make little shepherd's crook to keep the kids quiet when it wasn't their time to sing. But that didn't have the red stripe on it. That is an American invention. And so it's supposed to represent Christ as the good shepherd, and the red is supposed to be the blood of Christ. This is one I just discovered. Have you ever heard of a bride's tree? Yeah. This is something that was an old German custom that has been revived. And when a couple is married, they are given a set of ornaments. And they're supposed to be their first tree, or for the first year, they're supposed to have these. It could be a fruit basket, and generosity, a house, shelter and protection, a heart, true love, rose, beauty and affection, bird, a happiness and joy, pine cone, motherhood and fruitfulness, fish, God's blessing, a teapot, hospitality, and flower bouquet, good wishes. So you can still buy these things. They're actually pretty expensive. I think I saw them online for about $120. But I guess if it keeps your marriage together, $120 is a pretty good investment. German tree toppers. The one on the right is an angel. Remember I talked about the Christkind, which is kind of like an angelic person. Stars were popular. Again, this is one from our Christmas tree as I was a kid, and my brother still puts it up every year, so pretty good. Other German decoration, anybody see a nutcracker, a loose knocker? The Rauchermann, where they have little incense burners. And then there's the pyramid. I actually have one just like this one that came from Germany, and you put candles in there, and the heat makes that spin, so it's a continuous motion thing. Traditional German foods. Foods were important to the French. Germans, same way. One of the cookies, they make a lot of different cookies. This one in Badisch is called a Hildebrochen, and it's a bottom sugar cookie, and then there's a top sugar cookie with a hole in it, but they put like raspberry jam, or I like to do lemon curd in there. My wife doesn't like them because she never gets to eat them because I eat them all. So other things that German foods, Pfeffernusse is a pepper cookie, and they actually use pepper in it. Dresden Stollen. My mother used to make Stollen, and actually Aldi sells a cherry Stollen that is really good. So, little commercial. Lebkuchen is I guess a German gingerbread cooking, and if you make it into a Lebkuchen house or a Hexenhäusle, it's a little house that we talked about, like a gingerbread house. And this one's local, a Hutzelbrot. Anybody ever hear of Hutzelbrot? So this is like German fruitcake. A Hutzel is a dried pear, and this comes more from southern Germany, from the center of southern Germany between Württemberg and Bavaria. But it has fruits and nuts in it, dried pears, dried apples and things. So people would make lots of these for Christmas. We used to have a baker here, Tony Zarinelli, a good Italian, but he'd make about 1,200 loaves a year. At Christmas time, people from St. Louis would come down to buy the Hutzelbrot. So we still have friends that make Hutzelbrot. Now some of this comes from my background. When we lived in York, Pennsylvania, and was near the Pennsylvania Dutch, you had to eat pork and sauerkraut on New Year's Day, or you were going to have a bad year. So we still have a New Year's Day pork and sauerkraut party. But the other one was pickled herring. My mom had to have pickled herring on New Year's, and blood sausage, by the way. I don't know where that came from. And it really comes from, you want to eat pork because a pig cannot walk backwards, and a fish cannot swim backwards. So you're looking forward to the new year. That's why you eat fish. I think fish and pork. So the Germans also had Christmas carols. They're called Weihnachtslieder. You'll recognize the tune on this one. This one's another one that's a little bit quieter. You can see that English has got a lot of similarities with German. You can see the German and read that. So this is another one, Oh How Joyfully, that I kind of like this one too. So this is one that you will recognize. This is not a German song from Germany. It's a German song from Austria. A guy named Franz Mohr, Franz Gruber and Joseph Mohr. One wrote the poem, and Franz Gruber put the music to it. Again, I think this is a beautiful, beautiful song. It just takes you to Christmas and the outside, snow, that sort of thing. So this is another one that you'll probably recognize. I put it in here. A friend of mine gave me this songbook that was from 1894 from River of Oz, which is a little town south of here. And this was Elizabeth Jogger's songbook, and half of the songs were in German and half were in English. But you will recognize. We call it Old Christmas Tree. So one of the traditions in the German community was called Kriegen der Kirchen, which on the 12th night is you would go out and have the priest, or you would mark your doorway with a C and a plus, or the beginning of the first two numbers of the year, and then a C plus a B, M plus a B, and then the year. And it symbols either the three wise men, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthasar, are from the Christus Mansonium Benedicat, may Christ bless this house. I think they still do it up in Valley School, but that's kind of a tradition marking the door. Some that we're not sure if they're French or German, Christmas stockings, kind of goes back to the Bishop of Myra doing the coins, and so we have the little chocolate coins too. So we're not sure which one of the cultures that's really from. Some traditions, neither French or German. Any of you got a pickle that you put on your tree? It's not German. It was an American, I think, invention. They sell them in Germany because ours was bought over there. And Christmas cards was actually Queen Victoria, I think, started Christmas cards. She had some German. She got Christmas into England quite a bit. So that's about it. If you want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year in French, it's Joyeux Noël et Bonne Année. And we find that cultures start transcending themselves. This song is probably an English song, and the French have adopted it. So in German, if you want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's, it's Frohe Weihnachten und ein glückliches neues Jahr. It's easy for use. So I found this song that I thought was appropriate for. Not German, right? So that's it from the Foundation for Restoration of St. Genevieve and the Felix Valley House State Historic Site. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.